Yes, Lily, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I know we've been talking for quite some time,
No, thank to you, Danielle, for the opportunity, to have the space to share some of my journey and my experience.
and that's what it's all about, right? It's about your unique journey, how you navigated it,
Mhm,
and what you can, give back to the community and what our listeners can gain from your experience. So,
mhm.
that being said, Lily, can you give a quick overview of your career so far?
I have a bachelor's degree in computer science and software engineer from University of Washington. I'm currently pursuing my master's in cybersecurity engineering, and my prospects in career wise is I want to work in areas where there is computer science and also security, more like application security. And I'm open for opportunities either on the software engineer for security development or just software development or security analysts, from the cybersecurity side. So I feel like both areas gives me like a broad opportunities for some options.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that background. So let's start at the beginning. What got you interested? Why
Mhm.
did you go for your BA in software?
It's actually a kind of like a pretty funny story because I got interest when I was in California. I was going to middle school. Is the name of the school is Wheeler Intermediate School. Is in the Orange County area, and I had a computer lab class, and we get to make some presentations with PowerPoint. Like make some documents with like Word documents and like a calendar. So we got to explore a lot about computers. So that was my first introduction to computers. There were all like Macs everywhere on the institution. So I was putting myself into like technology. And then they gave us a trip to University of California, Irvine. They tell us like the programs, like what it's about. So I start thinking about, oh, I want to be in computers, I want to be involved in science. And but then we went to Mexico. I didn't even graduate. There was 3 months for me to graduation, and we went back to Mexico. It was quite shocking because I didn't see Macs anywhere. The environment was different. We didn't have computer labs. We didn't have computers on the classroom. For me, I was kind of confused, and I was navigating that system. And then I remember one of my professor. I asked one of my professors who had a laptop, and there was a Windows icon, and I asked him why your computer doesn't have the little face, and then like the face that usually Mac has. And then he says, no, this is a compact machine, this is Windows, this is not Mac. And that's when I learned more about like the differences. There's more than just Mac, there is Windows. And he was a hardware engineer and he was a math professor. And then so I started asking him questions. What are you doing in your computer? What's your computer doing? Because he had a laptop. And so that was kind of like the transition for me to begin like my curiosity with computers. And I was like 15 years old when I started to like open up myself into technology. And we know about Steve Jobs, like Bill Gates, the founders of big technology companies. So that's kind of was like the starting point for me.
So a lot of great things there, Lily. I was actually writing them down. Let's start with mentors, right?
Mhm.
So it seems like this professor was your initial mentor
Mhm.
because you noticed differences between hardware, in this case Windows and Mac.
Mhm.
So was he? How did you approach him? Did you just start asking questions?
The reason I approached him is because I needed help with a math homework. It was like a really difficult math homework, and then he was a math professor. So we went, my sister and me, we were in middle school. We went and then asked for help. We need help with this homework. And then eventually he became our kind of like, I don't know how to call it, like prefect, or like the people who are making sure we're going to our class on time. Um, so then during break time, I was asking questions. And then I asked him questions about what's your education? What's your degree? Like how you became a math professor? How did you become into hardware? And then that he was the first person who told me about college because I didn't know about college. I think at that time my I was gonna do whatever my parents they have for me. And then I think for me was just to go to high school and then, find a husband, have kids and marry. So I didn't know anything about college. So he was the person who introduced me about college because he mentions his hardware degree. And then he told me there's masters and there's PhD. And then that's when I became more curious and I started asking more questions.
I love that because the other aspect that you mentioned is curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
right? You want to know, and then you're just asking questions, and you found somebody that was willing to answer those questions
Mm-hmm.
and kind of give you that positive feedback or reinforcement
Mm-hmm.
to your curiosity, right? A
Yes.
lot of people, unfortunately, they might be curious, but there's nobody there to support them.
Yes.
And I admire mentors because they help us
Mm-hmm.
navigate our world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, you and I share a same culture that without that opportunity, yeah, whatever our parents want, and I know it's different
Yes.
for male and female in the Mexican culture. Now you get introduced to this whole new world
Mhm.
that you never knew existed. So I definitely love that.
Yes.
In regards to the mentors, he was your first
Mhm.
mentor. Any other mentors along the way in high school that kind of supported you?
Yes. Well, in high school, I had a couple of like advocacy mentors in school because unfortunately we didn't have enough resources. So my sister and me, we had to work hard to make our ends meet, to bring for our education, but also to bring money at home. And so there was professors that were advocate for having um, discount for the graduation gown or having allowing to like sell candies at school. That's the way I was able to pay for my education during high school. I was able to sell candies in high school, and that's kind of like the entrepreneur spirit that comes in within our culture, right? And that was also one of the kind of like mentoring in life. Like we were going through some struggles, and but we also had professors who opened those opportunities. That kind of put us under their wings to like protect us because they knew our financial situation.
Yeah, and then I think that adds the additional complexity and how you navigated that,
Hmm.
right? A lot of people in this country, it's well, you get a loan, you
Yes.
you might get some scholarships, and your
Hmm.
main focus is only school, right?
Yes.
But in your case, it was also, a job and trying
Hmm.
to, pay for school and then support, the family as well. So
Exactly.
that makes, you know, I think I've always said this, our culture more resilient
Hmm.
when it comes to the work ethic and, tener las ganas. And everybody
Yeah.
knows what I always say because
Yes.
I'm always saying it in my videos. I'm gonna translate that. But awesome. So then you get to high school, you graduate, you had all these mentors kind of feeding you about technology and IT as a whole.
Hmm.
What was your next step? Did you start college? Were you looking at it in Mexico or here in the US?
Well, when so we graduated high school, and it was already time for us to come back to the States, because we wanted to have greater opportunities, and we miss California. We miss, like the environment that we once grew up,
Yeah.
and there was time to come back, and we came to Seattle because there was like family support here, and then we came to Seattle, but our initial intention was going back to California because we kind of already knew like the city where resources were at, like stores, everything. So the navigation of, my sister and me alone, it, it was going to be easier. But we ended up staying in Seattle because we really like Seattle. And yeah, and so I started working in a restaurant. I started working in a restaurant, and I came with the mindset that I was going to go to college. I didn't know how I was going to make it happen. I didn't know anything about college. Um, but I started working at Chipotle, Mexican food restaurant. And that's how I found my first mentor. One night after getting off from work, like around 8 or 7, I was gonna head back to. I was working at Seattle and I was living in Bellevue, so I was gonna take the train to go to Bellevue. Um, and there was this lady, she had a Microsoft badge, and I was behind her. And, at that point, I already knew about Microsoft, Bill Gates, Windows. And I was like very curious. And I wanted to ask her questions, but at the same time, I was afraid of approaching because, I was on working clothes. I was smelling like food. And I was like, what about if like this person doesn't really talk to me, rejects me? So I was behind her and I was like, I'm gonna take the risk, right? And then I asked her, I noticed that you have a Microsoft badge. I want to pursue education in computer science within the technology field. Do you have any advice for me? And we sat down in and we share seats,
Yeah.
and we start talking. I start sharing some of my life experience. I barely knew English. My English was so broken. I had a book in my bag because I learned that by reading, that's how you can improve your language and increase your vocabulary. So we were just talking on the bus, and then she gave me her business card. I think she was very moved about my intentions to become better and to pursue education and about my background, that she became my mentor. So we were meeting every Sunday um, at a Starbucks or like libraries, and she was guiding me about like what are the expectations within technology, what are the expectations in industry, what are the soft skills that you need to have, some of the technical aspects of within computer science. And she was a PM at Microsoft, so she taught me a lot during those sessions, and it was just volunteering work that every Sunday we'll meet. And then that was the first time I visited Microsoft's campus because of her. She brought me into the campus, and it was like it was like I felt like I was getting closer to like these things I wanted to, like this
Your
dream
dream.
at 15 years old. Yes. And she started to like introduce me to other people, and I started learning about like MIT, like people went to like Harvard, like all these schools. And then that's how I started shaping my understanding of like, oh, what's the path for me to get education. So she was mentoring me along the way. And but my path was not, it was not like in the traditional sense that you graduate high school and then you go into college, and or like to these big universities. So for me, what it was more feasible, um I went to community college. I went to community college, and from community college, I eventually transferred to university. But I wanted to go to like MIT. I wanted to go to Harvard. I wanted to go to like these big schools. But I also got a kind of like a reality check that um, I was not in a position that I could have achieved such goal, even though I wanted it, because I was working. Not I was just not only supporting myself, but supporting my mom in Mexico. And throughout my childhood, I had already gone to like at least 8 schools between Mexico and in the US. So I think during that process, it became clear that even if I wanted to achieve going to like MIT, I was not ready. I was not ready to that step. And then so we found an alternative route, and then going to community college and eventually transfer. That was like the most feasible for me. So yeah, so that's how I started, like my journey, how I started.
It's never too late, right? There's
Yes.
still opportunity. Super young. Yeah, I think for everyone, it's a life journey to
Yes.
continue to learn, to be curious, to ask questions. But Lily, I really love that story. I think we didn't talk about that in the pre-call.
Yes.
And just having that fear, okay, how do I approach this
Mhm.
person, right? That's one. You overcame that fear
Mhm.
and potential failure. But
Yes.
if you didn't do that, imagine where your life would be.
Mhm.
So just taking that leap. So I really admire you in taking that leap because at the end of the day, what could they have said? They could have said no and okay,
Mhm.
already know, move on to the next one there. But they said yes, and you took advantage of that opportunity. And
Mhm.
then on the flip side, they're supporting you. They're giving
Mhm.
back to the community.
Exactly.
And real quick, and you don't have to tell me their name. Do I know them?
I don't really sure. Her name is Dee. Dee.
Okay.
Yeah, her name is Dee.
Probably not.
She's a really smart person. I mean, she went to MIT, right? She's really
Yeah.
smart, really sweet person, very caring. Was very lucky, very blessed to cross path with her, and I think my life changed from that point on. My life changed in so many ways, but also to have someone that keeps cheering you up when life gets difficult. That was one of the best kind of like things that could happen to me that always supported me. Like, you have to keep going. Um, so yeah, and yeah, I think like when you said, getting over the fear, I think for me, it became very clear very early on because of like traveling back and forth from Mexico to the States, going to 8 different schools, and had to create my own path anywhere I was going. For me, it became clear that I was alone, that only my parents can do much, and that if I wanted to make it somewhere, I had to take it on for myself. And I think that became very clear during my teen years, where I get to reflect about my life, and that's when I start overcoming the fear of rejection and the fear of looking down, because I had to try hard and whatever it takes, otherwise, I'm responsible for myself. So that was the hitting point of like that part of myself.
Yeah, no, I love that, having that resiliency and just believing in yourself
Mhm.
and, where maybe don't have the network yet to
Mhm.
kind of help us out. But in
Yes.
this case, Dee, kudos to her, and hopefully she listens to this.
Yes.
Yeah, we need more people like her, right, in
Yes.
the community,
Mhm.
and but yeah, no, overall, I love that story,
Mhm.
Lily. So you get your bachelor's, and then now you're pursuing computer science. What made you?
Cybersecurity.
Oh, sorry,
Cybersecurity.
cybersecurity. What made you continue in down the education path?
Down the education. So graduated with like a computer science degree, and there was. I feel like in retrospective, like I also started during the pandemic. I think in retrospective, um, we always think like we could have done better. So I always think about my degree, like, oh my God, I think I could have done better. I think I could have worked harder. I think I could have like done like work on the side, like projects, be more aggressive like with my portfolio, things like that. And so, but that kind of like became more clear after graduation. And then during my school years, I was leading some women in cybersecurity chapter at school, and that was like the first step for me to learn about cybersecurity. I knew about hackers and like breaking into systems. I knew about that, but I wasn't very familiar with everything that takes for you to work in like cybersecurity. And so that was like the opportunity for me to kind of like learn more about the field. And And then so for me, I became more interested in like cybersecurity. And once I graduated with a computer science degree, kind of like looking up on myself, the current employment economic situation like in the country, that kind of like put me in a position of where do I want to take my career? Do I want to like keep pushing for a job, or do I it is feasible for me to go back to school? And and then I started thinking, like, how can I bridge my computer science education with security? And I started doing more research, and that's when I came across application security, and I became interested in application security, and that's kind of like the reason why I went back to school to get my master's, and also like getting more education, learning about computer systems, learning about how everything works. It really never hurts, because it opens your mind about how everything connects with each other. So I feel like, this opportunity of my education might lead to something in security, or it might or might not lead to security, but I am very happy that I'm learning more in like about technology, computers.
Yeah, and again, a lot of great things there, Lily. And to one point that you mentioned, yes, cyber's more than hacking.
Yes.
It is a big field. That's like saying, in an analogy, you know, only in the medical field, you only do heart surgery,
Hmm.
which we obviously know that's not true. It is a huge field. Same thing with cybersecurity. So, and then also trying to understand the depth,
Hmm.
maybe not the depth, but the breadth of all the different roles in cyber, which, during your research, there's a lot, right?
Hmm.
Governance, risk, and compliance, things that I never really liked dealing with policy nowadays. But, now I'm learning how important they are compared to
Yes.
what, how I started here. But no, yeah, I definitely see your point, and your eagerness to continue to learn. You mentioned women in cyber. How did you get to know about that program in school? Was it something? Was it a panel? Was it flyers that
Mhm.
kind of notified you about that group?
Yeah. So I think the passion of me being involved in school with like clubs or chapters or any organization comes from like that not having the traditional path, or where you go to high school and then you go to college, or in high school you get to be involved in a lot of like community work or a lot of activities after school. And so for me, I was working and going to college, and so I didn't have time, or it didn't fit in my schedule to be involved in school. So I was journeying the opportunity to be involved in school activities, because I had experienced that, and I still wanted to fulfill that desire. And so I came across an email from the School of STEM that Professor Mark Dupuy, wanted to open the first Women in Cybersecurity chapter in Ayuda Bottom. So that's when I became interested, and I reached out to the professor. And I think I reached out to the professor like 3 times, sent 3 different emails. Um, that I was interested in opening the chapter, that I wanted to be involved, because that was like 2023, March 2023, when the pandemic was lifting. So not
Yeah,
just the pandemic took kind of like away some of that involvement in community, but I was just ready to build community at school, and then, to
yeah.
like have all the students, like community and work together. So yeah, so that's how it happened. And we went to the conference, and in the conference we learned about WISI's, the Women's Cybersecurity chapter, and like their organization, like their values, what they stand for, and had to navigate the conference. And when we came back, then that's when we established the chapter at University of Washington, along with like the vice president, marketing, um finance, like other roles. We were able to establish the chapter, and then we took it from there. And yeah, I really had a great experience. I got to meet, great teammates and good students, and we got to open more into the industry, because we had to bring guest speakers. So it was a really good experience.
Yeah, no, it definitely sounds like it. And you also set up hackathons. Can you talk about that as well?
Yes, the hackathon. Yes. So the hackathon, usually the hackathons that traditional is done is computer science based or like engineering based. And then so for me, I kind of like I had an internship at Avanade Consulting Company. I had an internship, and that's where I got to have a little bit more of like real world experience, collaboration. I got to learn like all the parts that it takes, all like the people involved for developing a project, software in real life or like a solution for a company. And so I became thinking about it that our like the club that was hosting the hackathon could branch out to include be more inclusive to other students, students in cybersecurity, students in business, or students in interaction design, because at the end we're developing solutions through technology, right? Or we're developing new technology, and everybody can work together because everybody brings different aspects of their skills. So that was like the motivation to do the hackathon in like a bigger like a bigger aspect, like bigger setting. And then we pitched the idea to the club hosting the hackathon, and they were very they agree with the idea. They really like the idea. And then we started to branch out with like other clubs, bring other clubs into the hackathon. And also that was like post pandemic, so we kind of wanted to bring more of like the community and student involvement in school. And so we were very fortunate to have Avana as one of our sponsors for our hackathon. They were sponsor some of the like the prizes for students, and we had mentors, and we had guest speakers that they talk about security, then they talk about data. So it was kind of like a bigger event, and the prior hackathon was 175 students. We were able to do it to 350. So we increased the attendees
Amazing.
by opening to more possibilities for students to attend. So that's how it happened. And this year I volunteer as a mentor um, for the hackathon, and it was 600, I think 675.
Wow.
So it increased. So hopefully next year, it increases even more, because like collaboration, everybody brings their skills, everybody brings something unique to the table. And the teams that I have seen being successful when I was a mentor, when I volunteer, it was the team that they had the business side, which she gave an amazing pitch about their product, and they have the engineer side, which is they do the prototype, they explain the technology behind it, and they were the winners. And the way they explained the product, the way they pitched the idea, there I couldn't see no flaw in it, and it was amazing. And hopefully we can continue bringing that into school.
That's awesome. No, that's great to hear. And, again, you giving back to the community there, Lily. Any other organizations that you're a part of?
Yes. So I this year I was volunteering. I was vice president of skill development at the Alpha Seattle chapter, which is Association for Latino Professionals. And so I was part of the board, and we work into brainstorming and understanding what kind of like events will benefit the Latino community and anybody who wants to attend the chapter events. So I was volunteering with them for a year, and I'm currently working at school to open another cybersecurity chapter. Now that I'm more involved with the masters, we want to not just like bring opportunities for master students, but we want also like the master students who are learning more in cybersecurity to help other students maybe learn some of that skills, and then understand what is cybersecurity. So more in like collaboration and like skill sharing. So that's kind of like one of the things that I'm currently working on.
Again, just amazing work that you're doing there, Lily. So, a couple of questions that I typically get from transitioning professionals
Hmm.
or students. Which certification should I get for cyber? Or should I go to school
Mm.
for cybersecurity? How do you answer those questions?
Yeah, that's a question that I think a lot because I have been asked that question, like why do you do education and not just certification? But for me, I wanted to do the education part because, like I say, I wanted to be involved in school. Um, for me, I didn't want to go back to the path where I do certifications and work because that was the point I started, right? When I first came to Seattle, I started going to work in education. And for me, I didn't feel like for me, it feels like I'm going back to that starting point. So that's why
Yeah.
I wanted to like do more of like focus more in education, like mm, just to make the most out of my education time, but also to have time to be involved in school, like to to keep like fulfilling that kind of like involvement that I always wanted. So that's like the reason. It's a like more of a personal choice. And I that's something I share when people ask me. That's like my personal choice because I have had people share with me that you don't necessarily have to go to get a master's or bachelor's in security. You can do it with certifications. And so I always bring that up when I talk to people that, there's a difference and then why am I doing something? And I follow this podcast. It's called IT Career. It is on Spotify. And I was listening to one of their recent podcasts and episode, and they mention very specifically that you have to know in what area of cybersecurity you want to go in order to get that certification. So it has to be more intentional compared to like maybe in the computer science world where you have all these languages, right? You have C++, you have Java, you have Python, and but in order to know what you're developing, you are going to choose that language, right? So if I wanted to develop um, like something that it is not like a video game, usually they will go for like C++, or like they have to take in consideration like the speed and memory management for like the program. So the way they choose that technology stack, I think the same thing in certifications. After listening to that episode of the podcast, they specify like if you want to go in cloud, this is a certification you should go for cloud. If you want to go into governance compliance, you should get this other certification. I don't know the certification. There's so many on the top of my head, but I will encourage people to first think about what area I'm interested. Like is it like the networking side, the cloud side, like the compliance, risk and compliance, like the governance, and then that kind of will like lead you into learning which one you have to take.
Yeah, Lily, great advice. I agree with you 100%. Everybody knows, so I won't mention anything. Everybody knows my opinion on certifications, but education, to your point, it's your personal choice,
Yes.
right? Can you afford it? Are you financially secure or be able to pay for that? So, yeah, education, and I know from you
Mm-hmm.
know our culture, it's all about education, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it might be different for other cultures, it might be different for other people, but at the end of the day, it's up to, whoever's asking us those questions to say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, what do you want to do?" Right? You have to identify
Mm-hmm.
what role, and then maybe certifications, maybe, community college, whatever. There's always opportunities out there. Um, what what has been your biggest challenge in the industry so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the biggest challenge that has been for me is imposter syndrome.
Mm,
Imposter syndrome. And I think because there isn't much of a reference to know how well you're doing, and if what you're doing is enough, or if what you're doing is what is needed. And I think that that's where mentoring it comes into play. That's where like networking comes into play, because then we get to talk to professionals who are already in industry, and we ask those questions. Oh, I'm developing this project. I want to integrate security in it. Am I doing the right thing? If this is what industry needs, um, how can I make it better? Should I pivot to something else, to a different project? Because at the end, there's kind of like this wall between education and industry that we don't get too close. So we don't really know a lot about like what are the business implementation, what are like the problems that they're solving, how they're solving it. So there's kind of like this distance. And for me, I think that's where like the imposter syndrome comes from not able to understand if what I'm doing it is what is needed or is what is right. And so it's more about kind of like looking for clues to like kind of like tell yourself that what you're doing is like the right thing. I think imposter syndrome never goes away. I think imposter syndrome is there to help you become better and to achieve whatever you say your mind to achieve. So that's kind of like one of the biggest challenge. And then also to tell myself that I don't need to know everything like right now, because technology is like huge, right? There's so many books about technology. There's so many things to learn. But I get to a point where like, oh, I'm not gonna apply to that internship, or I'm not gonna apply to that job until I feel like I know like the commas and the brackets from like the language, or until
right.
I memorize or I understand every concept in security and information assurance. So for me, I think that's currently one of the battles I have, is that take the risk of like applying to an internship or applying to a job, knowing that maybe I have like the basics, but if I have the desire to keep on learning and to keep on increasing my skills, I think eventually, I will get to a point where I become more comfortable, and the imposter syndrome will like quiet down a little bit. But we have to know where the imposter syndrome comes from. I think that's very important.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you providing that feedback. So let's shift to AI, well, to be more specific, Gen AI, right?
Hmm.
Generative artificial intelligence. How do you see it shaping application security or just security in general? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, and that's a good question. I'm currently learning about MCP. Um, I think multi-context protocol. So I'm learning about NCP. I'm learning more about how businesses or how companies can integrate AI within their business needs. But also understand what is the risk, and like what is the risk of like letting AI have access to this database or have access to these resources. So for me, I feel like security is gonna increase at the same time as AI, because we need to protect, the assets that businesses or data for like personal data or like consumers data. So I think they're gonna be growing at the same time. And so I'm still learning about some of the security aspects on AI, but I know some of them are related. For example, if you um, feed data into the AI, or you start manipulating the AI into start thinking differently, then you start taking over that AI. And so if you're using that for your business needs or in the company, then you run a risk that the information you're now getting from the AI is no longer, the truth, or is no longer feasible for you. So that's kind of like some of the things that I'm learning. Learning about like what are the backdoors or what are the things that are going to be open, exposed when integrating some of those AI systems in like already systems. So that's kind of like as much as I can go with like AI and security. But I'm still learning more about it, and I want to learn how to implement AI in projects, so I can also start maybe try to break into and maybe discover some of the vulnerabilities within like the implementation of like those AIs. I think that's a good way to like discover how much like bad actors can go into like breaking AI.
So are you currently using it to kind of increase your schoolwork efficiencies? And if you are, which model are you using?
So I haven't really I usually use Claude for all my research and for my education. Um, but I haven't got to the point where I'm working on some projects, and I want to put the model. I haven't chosen which model, but I want to put that model into one of those projects. And like for example, one of the projects that I'm working on is um I use public transportation a lot. So everywhere I've been using public transportation, I think most of my life in Mexico and in the States. And I also use it like very late at night when I get out from school. And then sometimes when I go to like events or like networking events. So I see so many things happening in bus. I see some of the risks that can happen. I see some of the videos on YouTube, like in other cities. So that kind of make me start thinking about developing an app or some sort of like resource where people can put comments or people can advise other people of like things that are happening while they're riding the public transportation. So that way people are more aware about their surroundings. They're not might be at the phone, or they can take precautions when something is going on the bus. So I'm working on doing that project, developing that project, and I want to find a way to integrate AI into that application, but also define what are the problems that AI is going to be solving for the application, how it's going to be helping the users, or what if it's really needed or not. That's kind of like one of the things I am currently thinking on integrating. And I also taking from my restaurant experience. I want to develop also a project that when you work in restaurant, especially in Seattle, which is like downtown Seattle, really busy, like one of the things that is the hardest is labor. Labor is one of the hardest because you have a certain projection that you're gonna need a certain amount of labor, but sometimes there is things going on around the city that increase the people in the city, so they have to have lunch, dinner, and then you don't have enough labor, right? And then when you don't have enough labor, then not just like the company reputation is at risk, but also people are overworked, people are tired, and you don't deliver the same service because you don't have enough people. And then so one of the things that I was thinking, like imagine if we had a restaurant that had a scheduling system that is able to integrate through AI, integrate with some of these events that are happening at the stadium, at the theater, like community service, anything that is happening around the surroundings of that specific restaurant. Then the AI can help um, kind of like managers understand like how many people you're gonna need and prevent like overworking people or not having enough people. And that comes from the personal experience. That's something I have experienced, especially during Seahawk games. And like that comes from like that solution comes from my own experience. But then we look at security, right? Like what are the security concerns about integrating a potential AI into like a scheduling system? So that's something that I'm still like learning and trying to understand more.
I love that, Lily, and best of luck on those
Oh,
projects. I
thank you.
think this is amazing, especially the restaurant business there and the scheduling. I think it makes sense,
Mhm.
depending on the events in that area. So in closing, I always talk to or ask my guests what is their favorite book
Mhm.
that they recently read or have read a couple of months ago or
Mhm.
whatever. And now I know you already mentioned a podcast, but a podcast that you would like to share with the audience.
Okay, yes. So I have 2 books. One of them is The Alchemist. I have read it. I think The Alchemist is. I usually read nonfiction, but I feel like The Alchemist is one of those books that takes you into a journey of adventure,
Your
and
personal dream, right?
exactly, and then like self-reflection.
Yeah.
So I really like The Alchemist, and the other one is The Man in Search of Meaning. The Man in Search of Meaning is there's a this person that unfortunately he was in the Holocaust, and he writes a book based on his experience of what he saw, and he explains that sometimes when you go through challenges, if you put like a purpose, or if you have a meaning of something you want to get out of your life, that kind of is what makes you push forward. It makes you more resilient, kind of have a vision at the end of like the circumstances, right? So I really like the book. And then the other one, and then the podcast is I think psychiatrist Marianne Rojas. I really like listening to her podcast on Spotify because she talks a lot about like the brain, and she talks a lot about how like our energy, like we sometimes we stretch too much to do so many things, we run out of mental battery. So I feel like sometimes in order to go further in life, we have to learn how to understand ourselves from many perspectives. And also because if we understand ourselves, then we know how much we're capable and how much we're not capable. So we kind of like navigate life easier, and also learn how to like compromise or not compromise certain things. And I often think about the human body, we're kind of like a machine, kind of like there's a relationship like computers and the humans. So the brain is kind of like the computer, the computer, you have to tell the system what you need to do. And I know sometimes the system doesn't work, and then but it's like doesn't work because that's what you put on the system. and and the human body is, and it is kind of the same, especially the brain is like whatever you put into the brain is what is going to show you, and also is wanna like it is what is gonna put you the focus or have the intention. So you have to train the brain for so many things, like so you're giving a job to the brain. So basically I like to listen to her podcast because it makes us understand ourselves better.
Thank you, Lily, for those
Hmm.
powerful recommendations. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes for this episode. But again, thank you, gracias. This has been an awesome time, and learning about your passion, your curiosity, your grit, and in a couple of years, we'll definitely see you on Fortune 500 magazine with your own company and being successful. So thank you for being on the show.
No, thank you so much to you, Danielle, for inviting me, and for giving me the opportunity of share some of my experience, and hopefully I can inspire someone out there who's going through some challenging stuff in challenging times. And also like a closing remark before I go is I sometimes like I became my college education and my journey, and it's still where I'm still on the journey, is because sometimes people say that whatever your life circumstances define your future. And I challenged that. And I wanted to prove myself that your life circumstances doesn't define your future. It doesn't define your life, and it doesn't define where you're headed. I know life has trying to prove me wrong so many times, but I still keep on having that phrase in my mind the whole time is, life circumstances don't define your future.
Love that. Thanks again.
Thank you.